Okay, we are officially recording. Thank you guys so much for coming. I know we're starting a little bit later, and there's still a few people I see are trickling in as we chat, but my name is Catherine Connors. I'm one of the team leads here with Adopt4Life, and I'm so excited that you guys are here and able to come to this amazing webinar. I know I'm very excited about it because I'm pretty anxious about summer starting, so I can imagine that other people are feeling the same. So just a little bit about who I am. I've been with Adopt4Life for just under 2 years now in different capacities. I'm the lady that you see that posts on Facebook all the time. I'm the one emailing you when you register, so now you get to see my face if you haven't previously. And I'm also an adoptive mom of 3. My kids are 8, 6, and 3. And 2 of them have special needs, so that is extra excitement in our lives. And so I'm going to introduce Rick, and I hope that I'm going to do you justice. I Googled you. So hopefully, please correct me if I'm wrong, if my Googling search didn't come up. So Rick is an active member of our mental health committee with Adopt4Life. And you've been a part of Adopt4Life for quite some time, right?
Yeah, probably about a year and a half.
A year, okay. Within our board of directors, we have committees, and so this is something that, sorry, Katie says you have no sound. Oh, can everybody else hear me okay? It says the sound's okay on my end, Katie. You sound very good. Sorry, I was just trying to multitask there. I just want to make sure that, Katie, I'm not on mute for you. So Rick is an active member of our mental health committee, and he is professionally a counselor and therapist, and you provide various supports to families, including play therapy, family counseling, couples, group therapy. I'm sure there's a whole bunch of others that I'm not at the moment. And he's been doing this for quite a long time, for about over 15 years. He's been supporting families, so he comes with a wealth of knowledge, as well as education background of a master's degree in counseling psychology and a bachelor's of theology. And we're really honored, Rick, that you have taken your evening, because I know with a family it's hard to take the time away, so we really appreciate you coming out and creating this webinar for us, because it is something that a lot of us families are really anxious about, and it's something that I think is important for all of us. So everyone seems to be able to hear me except for one person, so they said they're going to leave and then try again to come back in. So hopefully there's only the one person who couldn't hear us. A little bit of housekeeping stuff around the webinar. For those of you who are new, I'm pretty sure all of you have seen our webinars looking at the names. But if you do have a question, please feel free to ask here in the chat. There's also a question and answer panel that you're able to click on, and you can either ask those questions anonymously or you can ask them with your name there. The other way that you can ask questions, that if you go to the chat panel, you'll be able to see a 2 button just under where you can actually chat, and you can actually choose me. So if you want to just privately message me, and I suggest that you message me over Rick, just because he's going to be presenting and providing a lot of information, so I just want to try and make it as seamless as possible. So it's going to be an interactive webinar. We're really open to questions and discussions throughout the webinar. And I think the way that we're going to run it, Rick, correct me if I'm wrong, that you're going to kind of present, and then we'll kind of pause to see if there's any questions, and then if there's not, we're going to move forward. Yeah. And again, we're hoping that there's going to be time at the end as well for discussion. Mm-hmm. Part of my role is to make sure that everyone has a chance to ask those questions. So if we're finding that some questions might need a little more support or take a little more time, please just know that I might respectfully defer the questions. So all that would mean is that Rick and myself are more than happy to answer those questions. It just might not be something that will be done during the webinar. So if that happens, I'll absolutely be messaging you, writing down all the questions that we need. If you are seeing this on the recording, so if you're seeing this that isn't live, hello to you all again. If you have a question that you want to ask, but you aren't seeing this live or you've missed this portion, please feel free to message me or Facebook me, email me, and I'll make sure that your questions are answered as well. So please don't feel that if because you're watching this on the recording that you're missing out somehow. We want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to ask those questions. That's my spiel. I will stop talking and leave it over to Rick. I'm going to mute myself, but I am still here. So if people do want to, again, message me, feel free. Oh, one last thing, you're going to see a raise hand button on your panel. If you can please use that if there are any technical difficulties or if you can't hear Rick, if there's a problem with the connection, please feel free to hit the raise hand button. And that will just prompt me to kind of interrupt the webinar and make sure that everything is working smoothly. Now I promise I'm done. I will mute myself and I'll turn it over to you, Rick.
Thanks so much, Catherine. And again, thanks to everybody for making the time tonight. I know you're busy and we all have busy lives, and just hope that this is not only an informative evening, an informative webinar, but also something that we can collaborate on and have a little bit of discussion, because one of the things I think a lot of us as parents will learn is that some of the best learning takes place when we have those kind of collaborative discussions, and even in webinar format when some are typing, and we can learn from each other, even from each other's questions. So we definitely do want to make time for that this evening. So this is the first day of summer officially, right? We're just moving into our first day of summer, and it's the season that we often will look forward to because there's extra time for travel, extra time for rest. We're all getting better amounts of vitamin D. We're all feeling better. But as parents, we often have this feeling of, oh no, my kids are going to have so much free time. They're going to have more unstructured time. They're going to get overheated, and they're going to drive us crazy bonkers over the next 2 months. And there is this mixed feeling that a lot of us approach this season with. And if your house is anything like my house, when you remove structures, when you remove the sense of schedule, and then there's this increase in free time, there's increase in, maybe there's the feeling of, hey, I can increase my technology time, I can stay up later, I can have a little more freedom than I'm normally used to. That often not only leads to a little bit of chaos, but it can also lead to a little bit of conflict, and that is not something that any of us want in our house, but we do recognize these patterns, and we see it in families. We see it in all kinds of families, and just as Catherine and I were chatting before, it happens in the fall, it happens over the Christmas break, and it definitely happens now as we head towards summer. So if we can recognize that we all have these a little bit of a feeling of anxiety as we're approaching this season, then it's probably a good opportunity for us to do a little bit of reflection of what are we going to do to maybe avoid some of the pitfalls that we've had in previous summers. And as we look at kids, especially any kid that would struggle with an anxiety, an increased amount of anxiety on a regular day, we know that when you do remove structures, it does begin to increase the way that the anxiety responds. That our kids are used to, especially if your kids are in whether they're in school or whether they're in some kind of daycare, they're used to precise times, and they're used to having things known. So they know when breakfast will be the same time every day because we have to get in the car the same time every day because we have to get on the bus, we have to get to school, the bell's going to ring at this time. And really, we can schedule not only our kids' weeks. Once September gets going, we can really schedule our lives all throughout the entire year, except for these break times. And kids who are dealing with any kind of nervousness, anxiety, they can prepare themselves for school. What they can't prepare them for themselves is summer, because summer is this, we would think would be this gift of freedom and the ability to not be as structured. But there is a little bit of nervousness when kids are approaching uncertainty, and we would know this. I'm an adoptive parent. We've all gone through experiences where when kids don't have known, anxieties increase, and then often behaviors increase, and we see it come out in all kinds of different ways. So something really that should be actually a gift that could be liberating, saying you have the ability to have some freedom and have some choice, can actually be something that becomes very worrisome, very detrimental to family life. I want you to just do a little bit of reflection for yourself. What kind of holiday do you prefer? If you were planning a holiday, just go to this fairy tale land where you don't have responsibilities and you don't have kids to worry about. This is just a holiday for you. Somebody else is doing all, and go to the happy place. Maybe you're going to Hawaii. Maybe you're going to Europe. Maybe you're going. What kind of holiday would you plan? Would you plan one where you say, I may not know every minute of every day, but I know I have to do this, and I know I have to. I want to visit. I want to visit this forest. I want to hike this trail. I want to eat at this certain restaurant. I want to go to this certain art gallery. You would have knowns. You wouldn't have unknowns. And if you woke up every morning uncertain of where you would go, what you would do, maybe there is a nicety of that for a few days, 1 or 2 days. But after we would have 1 or 2 days of that, we would get this feeling of, well, I should be doing something. I should be going somewhere. It's very natural for us as adults to have these feelings. So as kids, it's going to be heightened because kids experience emotions at a greater degree, to a greater level, especially if your kids are getting into the pre-adolescent age, or if so when we're in this like 7, 8, 9, they're going to start to experience emotions at a greater level. And so when if your kids have heightened anxieties in June, it's extremely normal, because literally, imagine what's happening. The biochemistry of your child is actually changing when you're increasing or decreasing different hormones. What we see happening during these times when there's these uncertainties and anxieties, that they're lowering the levels of serotonin. And serotonin is one of the hormones that keeps us happy. And if we have coffee, or here, I'm going to enjoy one as we do this webinar, or if we do an activity that we're enjoying, it creates serotonin. So when we have this uncertainty, when our kids have this uncertainty, it decreases their level of serotonin production. And it begins to mimic some of the same feelings as those who would be dealing with depression. So they would have a lack of interest, and we know with depression, there's a lack of interest in normal activities, their desire to stay home or in bed. What they're experiencing is the same kinds of feelings of depression when you're losing that serotonin. So now they have this brand new feeling, this brand new experience within their body. There's also a decrease in the endorphin production, which is another one of our happy hormones, and the endorphins that would force a person to do something that increases their happy hormone. So they're going to have to. What do you do when you're feeling that maybe that hint of a little bit of depression? Is sometimes we would soothe ourselves by overeating. Sometimes we would soothe ourselves by being hyperactive, or we see this in our kids. So these normal feelings that they're experiencing of anxiety are decreasing their ability to self-soothe. So then they have this desire to soothe in another way. So what do we see? They get demanding, they get angry, they get impatient, and they have all these kinds of things that normally go through our homes in June, July, and August. So then what is the natural parental reaction to it? What do we want to do? Well, we want to control that reaction, right? We don't want to see our kids act this way, so we think, I just need to be on top of every detail, and if I can be super mom or I can be super dad, then I can get on top of this. So then we're following every kid around all day long. Put that down, eat this, stop that, be nice, don't say this, stop yelling, study that. And we start giving direction after direction after direction, which, what does that do to our kids' anxieties? Only increases it, because then they're not sure what the reaction is going to be. So then we've got this nasty cycle happening where the kids are not able to soothe. There's no serotonin happening. There's a lack of endorphins being created. So they have to do something to create endorphins. And then we have this reaction. And what we become is this, we become these helicopter parents. We ever have this where our kids are getting so many messages from us, and we're doing it with the best intention. We're trying to help our kids, but we are actually contributing to their anxieties. And I was reading this study from, it was called Maternal maternal over control and child anxiety. And it was the natural instinct for us to control every aspect of our kids' world is actually building more and more anxieties within our kids. And we need to find a way to give our kids this happy balance of they can control some things and there's some things that we need to be in control of. And I was actually chatting, if you were in the webinar earlier, where I was chatting about this with Catherine, trying to give some independence to my 12-year-old daughter. But I'm finding frustration when she has this independence, and so I don't want to build greater anxieties in her. So we've got this nasty cycle happening. And so then our kids are beginning to feel like, well, mom or dad is always on top of me, and I'm doing things wrong all the time. They begin to lose confidence in themselves. So what is their natural reaction going to be? Oftentimes we see them go to something that will self-soothe. Again, we see this natural draw to a tech time, whatever that would be for your kids. This is another natural thing that we're seeing happening in families all across the board, no matter what age kids are, right from 2, 3 years old, right up through into their teenage years. And so we're wondering, why is this their natural self-soothing practice? Well, our studies are showing that really our kids have built addictive behaviors, and there are natural things, processes happening within their body that are creating more endorphins than anything else. The endorphins that would normally be created when they have something that they like to eat, or they go and they do an activity that they would like to do. We're seeing that when kids get on and be able to be engaged in some kind of technology, there's a greater release of endorphin than when we see them when brain studies are being done than in any other activity, to an extent of 30 to 40% more. And if your kids are even a little bit older, one of the things that we're really finding, if they're able to post a picture of themselves, this is what we see in our adolescent kids. They're creating content where they can post a video of themselves, or they can post a picture of themselves, which is even creating more endorphin release. And what we see is that the brain is being stimulated by these self-centric stories, or just by some of the devices that are being used, and it's creating addictive patterns, addictive thought patterns, but also addictive hormonal responses. And what's sad is that we're finding some of the app developers for the kids are actually doing it intentionally. They're being asked, what can you intentionally do to create an addictive aspect to this app that you're creating? It began with social media, and I don't know if you've ever read anything about where Facebook developer, there's been people who have backed out of that world because they said, we are intentionally getting people addicted, and we don't want to do that anymore. And then Instagram went through that. Now they're putting that same kind of thinking into our kids' apps, which is just scary. And we know, what are we doing in this world now, where our kids are nervous about summer, our kids are acting, and the only thing that we can see to self-soothe them is going right to a device. And we're having this battle. And would anyone agree? I just want a little feedback. Are you experiencing anything like that in your world day to day?
I know that all three of mine are falling addicted. And it's hard because I almost use that as a tool too. Like if they're ramping up, I'm like, I need to cook dinner.
Absolutely.
So I totally feed into it. We have other people saying tech is definitely something we turn to as an incentive. And every day my son wants his iPad. Yeah. And
we need to, we don't need to beat ourselves up about this because this is something that we do have to make dinner, and our kids, we do have to find a way to get our kids to calm down, and we can have constant conflict and chaos within our homes. But it is important that we understand what is physiologically happening. So when our kids are not able to self-soothe, they're going to look for something that soothes them. And this is the number that we're finding, to a 30 to 40% increase in the endorphin release when they are on some kind of tech. And especially iPads and phones. Computer screen is not quite as much. They don't emit the same kinds of, it's not quite the same kind of light. There's not the same kind of addictive qualities that are built right into the apps. But that's what's happening. This is the only way that they are learning to self-soothe. So then there's no wonder why we're going to have these constant battles, because at some point we recognize, okay, that was a stopgap solution, but now I need to get you back on. We've got, we could do some coloring, we could go over to the park, we need to do a little bit of homework, or we need to get ready for bed, whatever it may be. And right now, just if you hadn't read any research about this, experts are saying for the brain to properly wind down, an adult brain, there should be no tech time 2 hours before bedtime. And we're doing this webinar from 8 till 9. For the child brain, the actual recommendation is 3 hours before bedtime. Don't let their eyes hit any of that blue light screen, which is for most of us, if you think about that, if there's a 7:30 bedtime, they're talking 4:30 is the time that tech time should be cut off. And you're thinking, that is the time I actually need a little bit of tech time with my child. Yeah, as Heather's saying, that's almost impossible. And you're right. The reason why it's impossible is because that is the way that they know. That is how I will calm down. In the same way that addictions happen to substances, where we know, how do I calm down? Well, it's with this drink, it's with this substance. That's what's happening with our kids. So it's not to say that there aren't constructive apps that can work to our advantage, that can promote learning. Like, there are some definite. I'm not one that says, hey, our daughter uses, she has her own phone now. We just activated her phone this year, and we are managing this same battle. Actually, I thought, as I was going, I would recommend this website, greatschools.org. It's got some resources on there for you if you were looking for educational resources to work with your kids. We know shows like Sesame Street, which are helping us to teach our kids, whether it's language, whether it's numbers, whether it's about friendships, things like that. We know that there are some resources out there that are helping us parent, but there was a study that was done. I picked Sesame Street specifically. That there was a study that was done when kids watched Sesame Street, what kinds of hormones were released, and when kids watched SpongeBob with lots of bright colors and lots of bright. It was the neon colors. It was the quick screens, whereas Sesame Street was the slow, methodical work, counting and repetitive discussions. Dora would be a similar one. Like that. We've got what's the pig one going on? I know it's beyond. It's
Peppa
beyond.
Pig?
Peppa, yeah. Peppa the pig. So they were basically, what they were doing in the study. They picked Sesame Street and SpongeBob, but it was slow, methodical shows designed for kids, and the quick, fast-paced, bright colored. The fast neon colors were triggering activities that would increase distraction and hyperactivity, whereas the slower ones were triggering activities in the Broca's area of the brain, where speech, math, and logical reasoning happening. So we need to be extremely aware of when our kids are going to the tech, which of these areas are being or which apps are they using, which shows are they watching. If they're going to build an addiction, if they're going to build some kind of addictive quality to this, we want to make sure that they're building something that we know is at least a positive thing for them. In the same way that you would say, well, I need to do some kind of physical exercise every day because it really makes me feel good, and I'm moving. We realize there's a bit of an addictive quality to that, but it's a positive addictive quality. At the very least, let's be on top of what our kids are watching and building something that's actually helping them, getting them somewhere, as opposed to something that's contributing to the hyperactivity and contributing to the distraction. But one of the other really interesting pieces of this, that as I was reading, is that a child under the age of 5 in this study, they were saying had 10 times the ability to absorb any kind of radiation that was coming from these devices. We don't know how much is coming through. There hasn't been enough time to study the long-term effects of what our phones are doing, what our iPads are doing. But whatever is coming, a child under the age of 5 had 10 times the ability to absorb that kind of radiation into their skull as their skull was still being formed. And over 5, there was still something that was being there. But all kinds of scary information out there, not to make us fearful, but to make us aware. What are we doing to be in control, where we know we've got this real dilemma? We need our kids to calm down. We want to be engaged with our kids. Our kids are hyperactive and they're turning to their tech constantly. What are we going to do? And one of the things that we found time and time again is kids are developing, the number one thing for success in this area is adult interaction. Because adults, we know how to structure, we know how to regulate our feelings to some degree. Not all of us are 100% successful at it. We know how to manage tech time. And some of us can be home more than others. Like we realize we don't have a ton of time. But one of the things that we really want to be building in our kids is this ability to be aware of themselves. I don't know how much research or reading you've done on emotional intelligence, but in emotional intelligence is the capacity to be aware of, control, and express one's emotions, and to handle interpersonal relationships. And the ability to know what you're feeling, to express what you're feeling, to be able to have the conversations with those around you, how you're feeling. That has actually become in where we see longitudinal studies about who will become the most successful from when they test kids to adults. IQ doesn't have the same kind of predictive factor as EQ or EI has, this emotional intelligence. And we can begin to build this in our kids right from a real young age. And it's in these battles where we begin to teach our kids, model for our kids, what is a healthy boundary, what is a healthy way to express our emotion. And even kids with sometimes limited ability to self-reflect based on age or based on mental health challenges or whatever it may be, we can teach them some basic skills about how to understand what they're feeling, express how they're feeling, and set good boundaries within relationships of how they're feeling. But the interesting thing is that emotional intelligence develops much more quickly and sometimes solely in the context of relationships. And that's why we want to build it with adult relationships. I just want to see if there's any
There were two comments. If you don't mind, I'll just mention them. So one of the attendees said that for like technology, they try to watch it together. So is that something that you would say it would be better than them watching it on their own? Is that?
It depends on what our purposes are. Like if we're really just worried about, is it building the addictive quality to it? It's not preventing any of that. It's not preventing is there anything that you can do together? Then as we get into this piece, absolutely, we want to be doing things together. It's just being aware that anytime we turn to a technological piece, we are building self-soothing in a device, as opposed to building it in and of oneself or in relationship with one another. And when we get to the end, one of the things that we're going to really talk about is what are some goals that we can set for our kids, and what are some patterns, because we know that patterns and structures are important. How can we do that with the amount of time, the amount of energy, the amount of ability that we have? But what are some goals that we can set that would be outside of a tech world, because that's how they're learning to self-soothe right now.
Yeah. And another question. So if we use like tech items to listen to meditations, should we actually be using like a CD player? So instead of actually having the physical viewing, would you recommend that?
Yeah. My daughter has an app that she uses. It's a Calm app. It's a free resource, and it's 15 minutes. And she's not looking at the screen most of the time. It's talking her through a thought, talking her through a relaxation. And I mean, I don't think we've gone down the road so far. We're not getting away from tech. I think what we want to do is find the healthy relationship with it. So that's why when you do it together, that could be a healthy relationship. When you're cueing them to do it on the phone. Well, how much time are we allowing for it? What time of the day are we allowing for it? Really, what we're hoping to build is this kind of emotional intelligence of being aware. Oh, I turn to that, or that's always my go-to. Could that be my second choice, or do I have a set time in the day when I go to that? And again, age and self-reflection ability all plays into this. Your 4-year-old is not going to be able to self-reflect, so you have to build the structures in there. But you want to be aware of that because you want to set the patterns along the way.
And I think that almost answers the last question that we got. So is it better to teach them to manage their kind of tech addiction or to cut it out?
Yeah.
So that they're less addicted.
Manage, because I think we know this as parents. The older they get, the more ability they're going to have to choose, the more freedom they have, the more choices they make independent from us without our awareness. So anything that we have just allowed just becomes something that they will find a way to hide from. So we say absolutely no. You can manage that until they're at school alone by themselves, or they start having independent time with friends, and then we can police it as much as we want. But then we get back to that helicopter parent going, do this, do this, do this, do this, which is anxiety building for our kids, as opposed to saying, I want to teach you the right way to do it, as opposed to just let's run away and hide from it. In a world where we're on a webinar right now and we set this up, like some are on our phones, some are on our computers, that it's not a realistic expectation in our world that you can hide from technology. So we want to build a healthy relationship with it as opposed to necessarily hide from it. Good questions though, guys. Absolutely. So emotional intelligence. What we will see, depending on the age of your kids, some of you may be in the age right now where your kids, when you do play dates, they play together, but they're playing beside each other. We see this in the ages of 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They haven't really become aware of the relationships around them because of their developmental stage. So they're playing together, but really the only thing they care about is themselves and sometimes their parent. But we move into this mid childhood, early adolescent stage, and it begins to change. They begin to figure out who is around them, and then they would choose to play with other people. But their entire being is being created in the context of relationships. So from 0 to 6 or 7, it's with mom or dad. It's just self or mom or dad. Then we get into this 8, 9, 10. Middle childhood age, pre-adolescence, and they begin to have other relationships that begin to influence them. And they begin to create a sense of who they are, understand who they are. They have these different abilities to self-reflect. And this is where we get into an understanding of, I'm going to use a big word, biopsychosocial. It's a model of health, but it's really the 3 core areas of our life that can influence our happiness and influence our health. And the proposal I would make in this webinar tonight is that if we can learn to, real basic, let's bring it down, how are we going to structure our summer so that we're not only managing the stress levels of our homes, but we're making it a summer where our kids make gains rather than become more entrenched in some negative habits that they create, which is being anxious and then self-soothing with technology. We are going to have to focus on all 3 areas because you can understand any issue from any one of these areas. But really, what we see is that this sweet spot here, right in the middle, where all 3 areas, whether it's the biological, you got some physical stuff happening that are just some things that we can't necessarily change, or these are the hormones, these are the medications, these are the physical parts of us, that this is just our biology. This is what's happening there. Then we've got the sociological realm where it's the people around us, what's happening in our family, what's happening if they have awareness of friends, if they're a little bit older, what kind of pressures, what kind of challenges are happening there. And then you've got the psychological, the piece that's happening inside the mind. And if we want a holistic way that we can be developing our kids to get healthy habits so we can have happy summers, we want to be thinking about this all the time. What are the biological, physical factors? What are the sociological factors? What are the psychological factors? And as I was kind of mentioning this before, if we are building this holistic model into our kids, they will increase their emotional intelligence. This is another one of the amazing things about emotional intelligence: knowing your body, knowing the people around you, knowing your thoughts. It's a higher predictor of success than IQ is. Those who go on to have success not only in school but also in business and in relationships typically have the higher EQ rather than IQ. And one of the amazing things is it stays fluid. It stays plastic for your entire life, that you can always be learning. And it happens in the context of relationships. Whereas IQ is fairly static. You can test for somebody's IQ at 12 years old. It will probably be quite similar at 12 as it is at 20, 30, 40, 50. But your EQ has the ability to grow and change. And that's based on the growth that you experience in these three realms. So I want to look at it. We're at 8:40, so I want to take about 5 minutes in each one of these areas and talk about how we might look at structuring our summers for success in each one of these areas, and then we'll take some time for some questions. So first one is the biology. So what do we know about our genes? We know, if you go back to your science classes in high school, we know there's something about 23 paired chromosomes, and there's XX and XY, and there's something about the nature or nurture debate, that what are the things that are innate within us and what are the things that are nurtured throughout us. And we know that there's something about our height and our body type and our hair color, and there's like dominant and recessive genes, that there's something that makes, why can two parents with brown hair have a blonde haired child? Well, it's something about a recessive gene or something like that. But what we know is there is some stuff that is in each one of our kids that is just biologically them. And that's why when you go to a counselor, you go to a doctor and say, well, my kid is presenting this symptom. One of the first questions that any doctor or any counselor will ask, they will say, well, is there any history in the biological family with that? They will want to know, because there are some things that are passed down to us in our genes. And it's not that, hey, the parent had it, so the child definitely has to have it. The word we want to know is predisposed. Some people are more predisposed to dealing with all kinds of things than other people will. So it's not 100%, it's just that they may be more likely to. So when we want to ensure healthy biological, healthy physical development within our kids, we know there's some stuff that we can't go back and change their biology. We can give medication, we can do treatments and things like that which can help support that. But there may be some things that we don't have control over. However, what we do know is that when a person does certain things, so by the kinds of foods that they eat, the kinds of experiences that they have, the kinds of activities that they participate in, we know that we can control what hormones are happening within our body to some degree. Not fully, but we know some degree. So a couple of reflection questions I wanted us to consider when it came to our kids' biological growth and stimulation over the summer is this. The first one is how often does my child need to be active in a given day? in the first thing. So we're getting towards our summer. Does my kid, are they fine with a half an hour? We go to the park and then they don't have the extra bent up energy. Catherine was talking earlier. What did you do today? You went to the zoo today, and you went to the zoo because you know that your kids typically seem to have a more agreeable, a more calm and easier bedtime. And how many hours does that take for you?
The zoo?
Yeah, no, how many hours does it take for your kids to have a calmer night?
A lot. A lot. You said half hour, and I'm like, what kids are you talking about? Many hours. Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of our kids, we would know if they don't get 5-6 hours of motion, moving, going, what do we see? We see increased anxieties. When we see increased anxieties, they're going to turn to something. I need to self-soothe because I'm anxious. I have all these bent up hormones. What do they need to do? So then this is when they turn to the tech. This is when they become disagreeable. This is when we have troubles at dinner time, when we have troubles at bedtime. We can absolutely influence how many endorphins our kids are producing by just being active, by just getting them out and running them. And you do it with pets. We need to do it with our kids. We need to find a way. Now, rainy days, parks, we all have different limitations to that. But if we should ask ourselves, if I want to have a successful summer, and different ages, different stages, I get it. How many hours, how much time does your kid need to spend being active on a given day to have a successful day? And if you can have that in your frame, don't just have that conversation with yourself. If your kid is old enough to have any kind of reflection, say, how many hours do we think should we be outside given our summer days? Well, we should probably try and be active and moving for 3 or 4 hours a day. When are we going to do that? We could do an hour or two in the summer, or an hour or two in the morning, an hour or two in the afternoon. So you as the adult, you are modeling a healthy lifestyle. You as the adult, you are taking control of structure. Your kid now knows every morning I know that I'm going to have an hour or two that we do something. Every afternoon I'm going to have that. So we're giving our kids the structure that they crave, because when they go to school, when they go to daycare, they have that. They know when it is. If we can set a time when that can happen. Now, if you're not home, there's limitations to that. My son can be active for 20 hours. Yeah, some of our kids can. My daughter was, when she was 5 or 6, she was the one that would crash. She would go all day. She would be talking and fall asleep mid-sentence. And then I would have like a half an hour left of energy to get anything that needed to get done around the house, and then boom, go to bed. But we not only want to bring the structure back into their day, but we want to ensure that we're altering some of the biological processes happening within the kids just by being active. So the second thought is that, what time of day is my child motivated to be moving? Some of your kids are up at 5:30 and they are motivated to be moving at 5:30. Some of your kids, you know what? They're not morning kids. They get up and they kind of got the sleepy, cuddly going in. That might be a better time for your kid to have their tech time. That may be a better time for your kid to have reading time, just some quiet time. But every kid, there is no better time of day for this. There is no, but you need to know, you need to be aware how often do they need to be active, what time of day is going to be good for them so that they're winding down. Because at the same time, each of us has a circadian rhythm that is somewhat similar, but not 100% similar. We know that some people will start winding down at certain times. And if we want our kids to be winding down by 7:30, probably for some kids, you do want them. My daughter was one. She wanted to crash right into bed. So every evening we had to structure some active time. For others of you, no, that really ramps my kids up. They need quiet time for an hour before bed. You can answer that question for yourself, but ask yourself that, and then build that structure so that your kids are aware. You could even make a little schedule, but your kids are aware this is when our active time is. This is typically when our active time isn't. Summer doesn't have to be like school, but there are elements of school that makes our year successful. We want to replicate that as we move towards summer. One of the things we want to ask is, when can I be active with my child? Because we want to be modeling for our kids. We also want to be shared experiences with our kids. They're going to grow in their emotional intelligence to understand their body as we are active with them. If you're working, obviously during the work hours, you're not able to be active with your kids. So when are you going to be able to do that? And being realistic, we're not superhumans. We have so many things we have to get done. There's housework, there's meals, there's work, there's things like that. But just answer for yourself, when are the times during each day, or when are the days, maybe it might be for you, when are the days that I can be active with my kid? But build that structure in so every kid knows, it's Tuesday nights, we go over to the park and we go on the swings, and then we go for a walk and we feed the ducks over at the little lake where the ducks are landing, or whatever. But they know, they can look forward to it. They can anticipate it. It builds regularity to them. It is self-soothing to them. Then and the reason we're doing this is because that takes the need to soothe from the addictive thing that they're doing. We're going back on our iPads. And the last thing is I would ask, how can I use tech in my child's physical activities? So the reason why I'm going to ask the tech question in all the areas, because we know they're already using that. So is it, hey, they love to be timed, and they go, see how fast you can run to that side of the park and run back, and I'll be timing it with you. And then they can see it on the phone afterwards, and you're building a healthy relationship with tech. It's not every time I grab it, I'm watching this show and I'm doing this app and I'm sitting on the couch. It's, I can be active with my tech. I can be doing something with that. And what we do, we are changing some of the biological processes right within us by being active, by just structuring that into our day. Though that is the control that we can have over the biological parts of us. I'm going to pause and see, does anyone have any questions just on that piece?
There's a few comments. Well, I have a question.
Sure.
Mine uses it for for physical activity, using it for music. So the question about the time and getting child motivated, active, I think a lot of kids go to day camp.
Mm-hmm.
So if you feel your child is getting a lot of activity, I'm hoping at day camp they're getting a lot of that physical activity out. Would that then mean there's less pressure on parents to kind of do that, or do you feel that we should still be engaging because there's also the time for bonding and
and that's a great question, because some kids come home and like they fall asleep in their dinner at the end of day camp, right? Like especially if you pick them up from like extra hours and you're not getting until 6 and you're making dinner and they're thumping their spaghetti, right? Like I know we've definitely had that experience, but depends on their energy level, right? And that's why it's so individualized. And these really are self-reflective questions, because every kid needs the activity. Some need different amounts because their biological makeup is just a little bit different, and their level of activity needs to be a little bit different. And like in my daughter's she's gone to theater camp, and when she got home from theater camp, she needed to get out there and run. and when she got home from like the outdoors camp, yeah, she was just exhausted and she was falling asleep. So, but there is the piece of, is there one time in the week that we can do this together so that we are building that good modeling? There was another one, mine uses music time to himself when doing something physical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the final is just a comment. So being outside saves us as a family, and sometimes we just get lazy about making it happen, which I totally get.
It's probably not lazy. It's probably just exhaustion. Don't be so hard on yourself. No, I absolutely like it. And that's why the schedule really helps. Like we don't necessarily consider summer schedule, but put it right up, just like, I don't know, on your fridge, but on my fridge, there's here's what we're doing Monday to Friday all year long. And then if we don't put that same kind of structure into our Monday to Friday in summer, this is when we can start to lose. And maybe your kids are doing okay and they don't need that kind of structure, but the premise of this webinar is maybe some structure for a lot of our families would actually do us a little bit of benefit. So that's the biological realm. So okay, we've tackled the biological realm. We know our kids are physical, they're moving, they're creating some different hormones that are self-soothing for them. Let's go to the psychological piece. What do we know about our psychology? Is that all of our kids and all their experiences, they will process different messages that are given to them. What they think about themselves, what they think mom and dad think about them, depending on their age. Like I said, if they're pushing 7, 8, 9, and then definitely all through the rest of their years, these kids are definitely processing messages. What do my friends think about me? How am I being perceived? How are these relationships happening? Our kids are definitely going through a little bit of a down phase in terms of the mental stimulation, because all year long it's been, well, I've got X number of hours of reading, I've had X number of hours of math, I've been stimulated artistically, I've been stimulated creatively. If they're going to camp, who knows what kind of camp stimulations are happening. But here's a couple of reflection questions that we want to shift from where they've done this for 6 hours a day, at least every day, 5 days a week, and then we move to summer, are these kinds of things still happening? And if they're not, maybe we're experiencing some of this frustration because our kids are not being challenged in the way that they have been all throughout the course of the year. So the first reflection question is, how long do I need to stimulate my child's brain every day? One of the studies that comes out that over the summer, even 15 to 20 minutes, if I can get my kid to read for 15 to 20 minutes, it maintains the gains that they've done all year long. And reading is going to be at different levels, right? If you're dealing with a 4-year-old, we're just doing basic words. If you're dealing with an 8-year-old, 9-year-old, they need to be doing books. But developmentally, 2 months off of anything is not good. Have you ever taken 2 months off of your diet? Have you ever taken 2 months off of anything that we do, that we're working on a skill, we're working on a musical ability? When you take 2 months off, you experience big losses. Well, our kids experience big losses too, which is a source of frustration to them. Endorphins are released when they meet a challenge. So like, it begins when they're learning to walk. Like, you know, the happy coo, and when they're just learning to walk. It begins when they learn how to grasp something, hold a cup, where they're all excited about, I don't have to use the sippy cup anymore, I'm not spilling anymore. Whenever you meet a challenge, whenever you do something, as even though it can be a frustration as they're working through it, when they succeed at the other end of it, endorphins are released. So there's the soothing serotonin, there's the happy endorphin release. When we remove that from our kids for 2 months, again, I wouldn't say it's necessary that it's laziness, but it's just we haven't built it into our routine. Our kids start to get frustrated mentally, psychologically, and they start to have frustrations there. So the reflection question is, how long do I need to stimulate my child's brain in this way? How do I do that? It's probably not happening at a lot of our summer camps. It's probably going to be something that we're going to need to take on. Where can we build that into our day? And if for some kids, hey, they're up at 5:30, have a little reading book up there that they can read. But as breakfast is being made, they can read, and they can sit there and they can just call out some of the words that they're learning, some of the books that they're reading. But find a time, because if not, we will lose it over the course of the summer. Summer is one of those amazing gifts that we've got the freedom. It's one of those dangers too, that when we lose our structures, we can lose some of this. We had a comment here. Catherine, what was that comment?
Sorry, yeah. So we had someone say, at the present time, they're being considered for a 6-year-old girl, and already raised 3 children, so they didn't have issues with tech back in 1989, which makes sense. And then there is a question. Do you want me to?
Sure, yeah. What was the question?
Okay, perfect. So thanks to my husband, our kids and I get a lot of active outdoor nature time, but I have a question about how to manage multiple competing needs. We have 4 kids, ages 5.5, 6.5, 7.5, and 9. Wow. And my husband will be home with them this summer. The younger 3 are adopted through foster care. On the older one was adopted at birth, and all 4 have ADHD, sensory learning challenges, and the youngest 3 developmental trauma. So suggestions for managing this. We have some camps, so there are 3 kids at home most of the time. They have a pool. They try and get on hikes and bikes, etc. But how do they keep sane? It's basically the question.
That is a great question. How do we keep sane? It sounds like some of your kids might be old enough, and I don't know, Chismic, I don't know if some of your kids have the ability to participate in building some of these structures for themselves. And I don't know what their abilities would be to do that, but any kind of ownership that kids can have in creating the process creates a much bigger level of buy-in and creates the ability to individualize it. Because I know as a parent, if I had multiple kids with different needs that I'm trying to structure, my first take at it would be, let me do the same thing. So we all go do this, we all go do that, but we all know that every kid needs something different. So any way that they can individualize it and take control over it, and every kid is going to have a different ability to have that, to have the control and to have their own influence into that. But anyway, even if you're all in the same area, but there's different levels happening, and they have some control over it. We're actually building capacity in them. And as we're shifting into the psychological piece, they may experience an endorphin release of success because they were able to set a goal and do their goal, and then we celebrate that goal. Like, hey, you met your goal today. You were out and you biked around the park today, and you met your physical activity goal or something like that. Or into the psychological piece, you were able to finish a book today. You were able to finish a book this week. You're able to learn a new word, or whatever it may be. Something that we're stimulating the psychological piece, and we know that it's structured into the day, but to some way allow them to build. To have a little bit of autonomy in building their own piece of that. And I mean, 5.5, 6.5, 7.5, that's just going to be a ton of work. I mean, there's just there will be moments of insanity, and it's taking the principle, how much of this can you take on and how much of it can't you take on, really? But that's, yeah.
Yeah.
We have kids 15, 13, 5. It helps to chunk time, like reading. Yeah.
And I know that we've done like individual baskets. So when my sanity has gone crazy, we actually have pre-made little bins that are independent play bins. So it doesn't always work, but we've been able to almost redirect in those moments. Like, hey, here's your bin to give me 20 minutes to, use the washroom without having little hands under the doors, those type of things.
Okay, so two more reflexive questions in that psychological piece is what are the areas where I can be supportive to them, as the older your kids get, the more stuff you may not be able to feel like you can be a support because they're starting to be on their own, but find out what are the pieces that can really engage their mind, their brain, their self-reflection, all those moments of how can I be a support to them? What do they need, and how can I be a support? And really, the third one there is, how am I modeling the emotional health? So how am I teaching my kids to say, like, well, I'm feeling angry right now, and express that, or I'm feeling frustrated because I've asked you to do this. And so what are we going to do when I feel frustrated, or even having the conversation, when your kids are able to reflect that back, I'm feeling frustrated, I'm feeling tired, I'm feeling whatever. We could have the conversation of, well, this is what I do when I feel tired. Or we could be modeling the journaling time. We could be modeling reflection. One of the things that we do to engage each other's psychological development as a family is and it's just funny. It just looks crazy. We had a friend pop by one time, and they saw us. We all walked in there. We were in the living room. We all had our eyes closed, and we were just listening. and you can't do that long, especially with my daughter. She's hyperactive. She's going all the time. But we had, can we listen for 30 seconds and then just reflect, what did we hear? Well, we heard this bird, and we heard a car go by, we heard whatever, but it was just teaching her to listen to what she heard, reflect, this is what I heard, and this is what I imagined it to be. A small little piece, something we could only manage probably once a week, to carve out these 5 minutes just to do the reflection as a family. But at least something we built into the week, that I'm modeling emotional health. I'm modeling reflection time. What am I doing to stimulate the brain? How can I be supportive at the level that I'm comfortable with? And how am I modeling health that way? Okay, last one. And then we'll get to we'll just get to some questions after that. But the sociological, the sociology side of that. We know that another one of the key factors for all of our kids for success is going to be who is around them. And that's just it's one of those principles for life. Is one of the things that makes us successful as adults is who are our supports around us. We know we can't do parenting alone. We need supports from friends and family and programs and structures. That's why we're part of Adopt4Life, right? Because we need a community around us. We know this happens at work. There's this shift from the autonomous worker to we work in team, because team is a much more supportive and a better model for getting to places where we need to get to. Well, it is definitely something that happens in our kids' lives. And one of the things that is removed from our kids at times when we move from school to summer is that the team that has been around them for the last 10 months, Monday to Friday, is now removed from them. And although they may be going to different camps at different times, they may be in different programs, it's a different group. They may have nervousness around who is going to be there, who isn't going to be there. And if they're not in a camp, then that's fully removed from them, and then it's only the people in their home. So all the structures that they relied on to be successful all throughout the 10 months, boom, gone from those kids' lives. So a reflection question for us is, what am I doing to facilitate positive relationships in my child's life? So if you're home with your kids, is how often can I regularly manage play dates? Can I regularly manage hosting kids over? As your kids get older, where is a place where they can be volunteering? Where is a place where they can be going over to somebody's house? But if we don't make this regular, if we just make it, well, today, yeah, I got up and I called so-and-so, that might be okay. That might be okay for you as the parent, because you had it in your mind, I may be calling this friend tomorrow and we might be getting together. Without the foreknowledge, without the ability to know, hey, on Wednesdays, that's the day when we look to get together with another family. There's this nervousness of, am I ever going to get to see my friends? Or when am I going to get to see my friend? And then the anxiety builds up, they have to self-soothe, and they may or may not go to positive places. So we want to ask ourselves, what am I doing to make sure that all summer long I am continuing to have positive relationships in my child's life? And that could be with kids, that could be with adults. Like, so some of our kids are more drawn to, like, they had this great connection with this teacher. So maybe there's a class that they can take, not with the same teacher, or some other kind of, whether in a program, whether it's soccer or whatever it may be, or it's just friends in the neighborhood. But what am I doing to make sure that I have positive relationships in my child's life over the course of the summer? And the second thing is this, is what level of involvement is healthy for me in my child's relationships? So we the younger they are, obviously, we're hands-on all the time, but we need to recognize in ourselves, we are going to have a draw to helicopter parent and be involved in everything and make every decision that we can for our kids, because we know we're involved. We wouldn't be in a seminar like this today if we weren't involved parents. So we have to be real with ourselves that our weakness is going to be on the management side, on the micromanagement side. So how much involvement should I have? How much autonomy do my kids need just to have the social interaction with another child, and just to have the freedom to have that? We want to make sure it's a positive relationship, but we can't necessarily protect them from anything negative happening. And how much time am I going to be involved in that relationship? How much control do I have? I want to bring that back to the tech world. If your kids are in the age, we've said, like some 13, 15-year-olds, some 9 and 10-year-olds, they're going to be having some of this relationship is going to be done online. So the reflection question to have for you is how involved do I need to be? Can I realistically at the end of the day go through every text message that they sent and say, show me who you were talking to today? Or is it once a week we sit down and say, show me the sites that you were visiting? Or is it every time they pick up the device, it's, let's go on this together and let's see what's happening? Different kids need different boundaries. You will know your kids, so there isn't necessarily one answer fits all. But the reflection question to have, and probably to have with your kids, is what is the level of involvement that I'm going to have? Because I want to make sure that you're successful. I want to make sure you have the right people around you, because when they have the right people around them, that takes care of the sociological soothing, which leads to our good summer. And if we go back, remember the goal here that we're actually looking for is we want to have good sociological development, psychological development, and biological development, so that all summer long we're not only avoiding the anxieties which lead to the behaviors, but we're actually having our kids make gains all summer long. We're not going to be perfect. there is still going to be anxiety because all of these things are still true, is that they're out of school. There is more freedom. There will be up later. There will be less structure. But if we can take some kinds of control, we can help to decrease this, and we can empower our kids to continue building and growing all summer long. That is the end of my presentation. We're just after 9 o'clock, so we've got some time here to take some questions and just have some discussion and reflection on any one of these pieces.
That was amazing. I've learned a lot personally. Thank you so much. We have a few comments coming in, one from me. Um, it just really hit home when you said giving our children, the autonomy to develop the relationships themselves.
Right.
I personally have such a hard time with that because my son gets bullied a lot. He has FESD. He doesn't always recognize he's being bullied, and I'm totally that parent that's like, so, but he also needs to learn how to handle it himself. So it really, you hit it for me. So it's a goal that I need to work on, I think, for sure.
Well, and it's really, I mean, I don't know how his ability to reflect on that would be, but even asking, like, when is it helpful do you know when you need mom's help to step in, or do you know, and he may not, but at least he's participating in it and beginning to think. And we know there may be a limited capacity for him to ever fully know and be aware of exactly where he needs help and where he doesn't need the help.
Yeah.
But at least we're empowering him a little bit to go, yeah, I need to think about when is it do I need help and when is it that I don't need the help.
Yeah, because right now he doesn't think about it because I'm there. So that's a really great point. We have another comment. So my son is autistic. So having a schedule is needed. School being out makes it harder for him to interact with his friends. Absolutely. And he's not going to go to camp because his anxiety is so high, which I think there's a lot of kids. I'm sorry, my cat's attacking my window. If you hear some background noise, everybody, I'm sorry.
And honestly, summer camps, most community summer camps are not set up to help a lot of kids, or anywhere on the spectrum would be. They're not set up to be successful because there's a lot of stimulation happening. You've got 16-year-olds trying to manage a group, and they're doing their best, but they don't know how to be successful with that. So it's definitely a regular challenge. So then the question really is to say, and if you're at work, obviously, Daphne, you asked that question. Daphne, are you at home or are you working right now? Okay, yeah. So then the questions you would want to be asking, and somewhat in part, again, this is what Catherine and I were just talking about, but any empowerment that you can give to your son is great so that they can begin to learn to ask those questions. They may never get to the place where they're in this Zen place where they know their feelings, they know everything. Everybody's going to be at different levels, but we want to build every chance we have, build capacity to say, so how many weeks of summer camp do you think or do you want to try 1 week of summer camp this week? And I know that summer camps fill up, so we may have to be more proactive on that. But even if they feel like they have some autonomy to go, I can do summer camp, but I need to be able to call if I need to come home, or I can do summer camp, but I can't necessarily do it all summer long, and then say, okay, so why do you feel like you need to be able to come home? Why do you feel like it's only 1 week? And you may lose them at some point, but we're trying to build that reflective piece and trying to say, and what does it feel like when you need to come home? Is it because you're angry? Is it because there's other kids around? Is it because your brain is feeling full? And look at the different areas. Is this really, hey, they just need to, it's really a physical thing, it's a biological thing, or is this a friend thing, or is this more of an internal thing? But ask these questions of your kids, model having the conversation, and finding the time to do that, totally difficult, I get it, but any step that we can take in that area is a huge step.
So another question. So when you have a child that friend shops, what would an appropriate involvement be while still giving them the social opportunities? So at school, there's a lot of intervention and assistance with the social skills, but you can't do that as much in the summertime.
That's a great question. Yeah. One of the things, again, because we're trying to decrease anxieties, so find a place, I would say, where they have experienced success, where your child has been successful and build there. So whether it's with a person, whether it's in a certain number of kids, like do they do bigger, do they do well when it's one-on-one, or they do better when they're in a group, when they're in a team sport or something like that, and build on that. Because you're right, all the supports are gone now. And so there is this nervousness. So wherever that would be, build on that, start there, try to replicate that as much. And if it's like, well, they really do well one-on-one, well, can we build once a week, twice a week, whatever you can realistically build. Here are 3 times in a given week where I know it's one-on-one. It would decrease the anxiety, because then they know it's not every day am I going to get it, but it's these times. There isn't more. They need to be in larger group. Well, let's find 2 different soccer programs and a basketball program and a summer camp and all these things. But yeah, find where your child is most successful. Start there, build it there.
That's amazing advice. So just comments, people saying that there's a lot of great food for thought. Thank you so much, and they enjoyed it. A question. So our 5-year-old is struggling most of the time right now. So his teenage siblings find him really obnoxious.
Siblings are great.
They want to love him and interact with him, but he's so consistently angry and abusive. Thoughts on maintaining and building those relationships over the summer?
Yeah. So you've got teenage siblings, and teenagers can be fairly obnoxious as well, from my experience. not just 5-year-olds. I work with teenagers a lot, and they're going through a lot of the psychological piece, and they're trying to figure out how do they regulate their own emotions and their own thoughts and their identity and all that stuff. So having a 5-year-old that wears on them, I can understand that. I'm going to draw a little bit back on to the answer we were just giving there. Is there a one spot or one time where that relationship is more successful compared to other spaces? So is it when they have one-on-one time alone, or maybe they could take the 5-year-old to the park, and they say, you know, I'm going to set this hour. Let's go back to the scheduling again. I know that I can be physically active because he likes to run, and I could run with him around at the park, and and maybe an hour is too much, so maybe it's a half an hour, but I could do a half an hour on Tuesday evenings, and I know that that's what we do. Or maybe it's reading, and I know that at 12 o'clock on Fridays before I go out with my friends, I spend half an hour reading, and we try and make it as successful as possible. But chunk it and find the areas where it is successful or more successful, because maybe right now I know there are times when you may feel, well, it's just never successful. So look for the times that feel more successful, and chunk those small and build on those, and think in the 3 realms. Is this, hey, we do a couple of reading questions together, math questions? Is it, no, it's really just relational, where we watch the show together, or we walk over to 7-Eleven and we get something together, or is it in the physical realm where we do something physical, but utilize that as part of the structure for your 5-year-old this summer. Be bringing your teens into it and empowering them to kind of be part of the solution and part of the family structure over the course of the summer.
Perfect. So we have 2 last questions, maybe. Yeah, 2 last questions. So just in being conscious of time, and especially with Rick, because he is taking his evening to be here. So I'm just going to ask these last 2 questions. And if there are any other follow-up questions, again, like I said, please feel free to message me, email me. I'm everywhere, so I'm very accessible. So the question is, I'm just scrolling up here. So any suggestions on this? Our younger 2 wake up super early. I get that, so do mine. Like anywhere from 5:30 to 6:30. We're letting our youngest have screen time because we're too brain dead now. Then we decided to cut screen time, and they can have books and bins, but they are very loud and end up waking up the older 2. So sorry, I'm just scrolling down. So it makes for a really hard day at work and being totally sleep deprived. I can never get to bed early enough to be rested to be up in the morning. I wake up at 7 now and out by 8. Any suggestions to make my mornings manageable would be greatly appreciated.
Just make them sleep in longer. That's the perfect. That's not going to happen, is it? No. No, it's an extremely difficult thing, because when our kids get up and they're we know they're drawn to tech time, and it's may not be where we want them to be first thing in the morning. It's a great question, because every kid will be drawn to something different, and it may be, you go, what is the win in the morning? Is the win in the morning that I keep them away from the tech, or is the win in the morning that people sleep in more? And we're going to have to identify the win, and feel okay that if the win is, hey, we just need sleep because we do not function, and I feel like I should be doing more, but this is a phase of life where I'm like, at some point they will be sleeping more, then let's not beat ourselves up to go, the win is we all slept, we all feel better, and then I will take on the tech later on in the day and say, well, you had an hour in the morning, so we're going to look at an hour later on in the day, but then the rest of the morning we're doing this, and this. But yeah, it's not a loss every time that they're on tech for longer. It's because, again, this isn't a world where I think realistically we can teach our kids to get away from it all the time. It's just building those healthy relationships with it. So you've got a real challenge. There probably isn't 100% great solution to it. So I would go to identify what's the biggest win, and kind of navigate towards that, and realize that this probably isn't going to be the same. This probably isn't going to be the same answer in 2 years. In 2 years, you're probably not going to say next summer, well, the win is that they all sleep in more, because maybe they're sleeping until 7, 8 o'clock at that point. So then you're saying, okay, we don't do this summer. We're not doing tech before such and such a time, or before we make breakfast or something like that.
That is a really great perspective. Okay, one last question here. When managing multiple children and trying to have a schedule, I find that it becomes more stressful to try and follow the schedule. So it often becomes so negative and frustrating. And if anything deviates from that schedule, which happens a lot, they can't handle it. So structure works, but structure can be very hard.
Yeah. and it is knowing your kids and knowing your family, because we really do have a gift of summer, and that some kids just need the freedom, and they will thrive in the freedom. And you could even, maybe what the structure looks like for you is here is a list of all kinds of things that could happen. So afternoon, call it creative time. And what does creative time look like? Well, it could be I'm playing at the park, and it could be that we're baking. It could be that we're doing an art activity, or so you build the structure so they still have awareness, but it's the structure is not so rigid. The structure is actually a little bit of freeing, or maybe 2 days a week are structured and 3 days a week aren't structured. Like for some kids, like as we were talking to earlier, that if you remove any structure, it's almost meltdown time. And for other kids, no, the summer is a gift that we can make use of and move away from it. So there isn't one pat answer, and I think as a group, as a community, we learn that, right? That it's going to be absolutely different for every family and every kid. So if we're trying to force one thing we heard, or one thing we read, or one thing that was successful for another family into our family, and it just feels like this is a square peg in a round hole, it probably is. It's probably because that solution isn't good for you. And if your kids are not wound up, because if your kids are more wound up by structure, then by all means remove some structure. You have 2 months to be different. It's just being attuned and being aware. And again, what are we trying to do? Build that kind of capacity within our kids. So if they're like, well, it had to be that way. So then let's ask, so when it doesn't go the certain way that you thought it would be, how come that's really stressful for you? Is there any times in your life when it would be helpful to not have a structure? And I don't know how old your kids are, but so make that an age appropriate reflective question. But if it's like, do you ever have fun when it's not planned, or when it's not planned? And they go, yeah. Or, okay, here's one of those times when it's going a different way than we had planned, and it's going to be fun, and move on for that. But really what that is teaching your kids, I am aware of what I felt. I had a little bit of discomfort, and I was able to move on because I had a support of somebody around me. And you've just built capacity in them to manage through that. And again, hopefully navigate a little bit away from the conflict over the course of the summer.
That is amazing. I feel like we almost put you on the hot seat there. Brilliant answers. That's amazing. So we're just almost at 9:30. So I'm just going to take this opportunity, Rick, again, thank you so much. This was honestly an amazing webinar. I know I received messages from a few people who registered who life got in the way, so I'm going to be sending it to them. And for the participants who came and asked questions, thank you so much for coming as well, and for listening and learning, because really it's in everyone's best interest to do that again. And I see a few comments from a lot of people who had to leave a little bit early, just thanking you for all of the amazing information and insights. For those of you who want to continue speaking with Rick, or you're interested in his therapeutic or counseling services, his information was found on the webinar where you signed up. But if you want his contact information, please feel free, again, to contact your parent liaison, contact myself, and we can absolutely make sure that you guys are in contact as well. But I think that's it. I don't know, Rick, if you have any last closing.
No, thank you guys so much for participating, for asking the questions, because I do truly believe, not in an expert model. I mean, I gave some of my own reflections, but I think we hear from other parents, and if you were on earlier, I was coming in rushed because my daughter had the time of her concert messed up, and she's all gone. So it's not an expert-based learning. This is a community learning. So I really appreciate everybody just sharing and being open, and the learning we all had today.
Absolutely. Okay, I'm going to be logging us off. And for anyone, I just saw someone asking for a copy of the webinar. If you're listening to this live and you still want a copy, please feel free to ask me. Yes, this video will be available through me, through Adopt4Life. So just contact someone through Adopt4Life, and we'll absolutely make sure that we give you a copy to rewatch, because I know that I will be personally. So that is it. We are hitting 9:30. Thank you guys so much again, Rick. This was really an insightful webinar, and we hope that everyone has a great evening.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Guys.